All right. Hello, everyone. This is Humera Fasihuddin. I'm standing in for Tara Rahmani for Life's Not Linear with Jackie Dearring. And Jacqueline should be joining any moment now. And I think she's here.
What if you could actually keep that much cash?
And there she is, Jackie Siler-Dearring. So great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Humera.
It's been a while.
I know it has been. How are you doing?
I'm doing really great, actually. I can't complain. How about you?
I'm doing really great as well.
Thank you so much for um, agreeing to be interviewed today for Life's Not Linear. You have such an interesting story. Um, Many in our community have heard bits of it before. Um, let's let's start by like an overall introduction, who you are, um, where you went to school, what you majored in, when you graduated, that kind of thing.
I am Jackie Siler-Dearring. I graduated from North Carolina A&T State University. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in biomedical engineering.
Yes, and you graduated in what year?
I got my bachelor's in 2016 and I got my master's in 2017.
Right, and I think I might have seen you soon after you graduated with your master's. Just
Yes.
you were about to take off from the Greensboro, North Carolina area and
hmm
head off to um, tackle your first job with biomedical engineering degree, master's degree in hand. So tell us how that went for you. What came next?
Um, well, it was when I first graduated, it was different for me a little bit because I was married uh, when I actually started my first job because I originally started school back in 2008. So for me, by the time I did get my degree, I was married and um, I had someone else to consider and think about when I was pursuing where I wanted to go. And in my field, my major, there's not a lot of places that have biomedical engineering as a major. So um, that was definitely a something to definitely consider when pursuing a role because I didn't just have myself to think about like a lot of other college students are able to do. I had to make sure that wherever I went, it was a place that would be fruitful for myself and my spouse.
Like what geography did you pick and why?
When I started out, I chose the Midwest, so I actually started out in Michigan. And I physically chose that place because with me being in North Carolina, I had been away from my family for about um, it was about 9 years because all my family lives in Rochester, New York. And so I wanted to be able to be within close driving distance to my family. And so that drove my initial decision. So the ability to start out in management as well, I thought it would be great for me to be able to have an opportunity in leadership starting out my career because being a part of the UIF program, considering getting an MBA. And so me being in leadership part of that, a pathway to consider being more on the business side and things of that nature.
Right. So you picked the Michigan geography, and as I understand it, that's just like it's like a day trip. I mean, a long day, but a long day trip to New York. So that's a good choice. Um, and what company did you join?
I originally started out at a company called Abbott. You may have heard of Abbott Laboratories. They're a large company. And they have, so if you think of, just to kind of think of things that they produce, if you think of something like uh, Ensure or like they do diabetes, they do cardiovascular, they have diagnostics. For me, that company made sense because a lot of my research for my master's was in the cardiovascular field. A lot of my undergraduate research was in the diabetes field, and also I did a lot of focus on diagnostic devices for things like HPV and stuff like that. And so organically, it made sense to choose a company that had businesses that are aligned with a lot of the research I did. In addition, they stood out to me because they had a Black female in the VP position as well. So that was something that was impressive to me as well.
That's, you know, there's a plug right there for how to attract, great underserved minority talent is having your C-suite reflect the audience that you want to attract. So major plug for Abbott there. And if I recall correctly, you had a role on the manufacturing side of the house,
Yes.
which is where I cut my teeth first job out of college too. So tell me what you thought of working on the manufacturing side.
It was very enlightening to me. So I wanted to really get into the post market side of things, or in the space of manufacturing, because I wanted to understand, like, once a product is, I did a lot of research and stuff like that. Like, I had the opportunity to intern at the FDA. And so I was like, like, what happens once a product is manufactured, has to go out the door, and like, what does that look like? And for me, it was very fascinating to see all the lean manufacturing processes and things that are put in place just to get a product out the door to a customer. Um, and it was very enlightening, for me as a Black female, in that space, because on my leadership team I was only female and I was the only Black person, that served in that capacity. So that was interesting to be a part of. But I also I learned a lot and I grew a lot. And honestly, in my current roles, it's become very helpful because it's allowed me to kind of understand. I currently work in new product development in my current role, which means that I'm involved in making the products that customers need, and then already understanding and knowing who my end users are, and like how to make sure it's easy to be manufactured, or all those things that, if you don't have that experience, can be a major gap when developing a product, because sometimes things seem like they can be easy, and then you send it out and people are struggling to make sure that the quality is always in place, or making sure it's easy to consistently make over and over. And so that experience has been very valuable to me, and it's something I rely on a lot too, because I understand the struggles of working 14, 16 hours a day, and having long days and long hours as well.
Yeah, especially manufacturing of medical devices, where it's such a highly regulated realm, and it could, the quality of the device and the being able to get something approved or have something yanked.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to mess around with. It's not like you're manufacturing Crocs or zip ties or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it, and I can imagine that is an incredibly valuable set of experiences that help you land that product management and that marketing role. So tell us about the switch. How did it go in deciding where you wanted to, what kinds of company you were looking at, what geographies you were looking at, and why?
Okay, so I started, just to kind of go back, when I was in my master's degree program, being a part of UIF and having the ability to have the students be my customers and understand what their needs were, and developing like the business landscape and all those things, it really piqued an interest that I didn't know I had. And so that's when I started seriously considering, like, hey, how can I do this more? Like, being a UIF literally opened my door to possibilities I never considered. And that's like wholeheartedly the truth. So as I was like, it kind of created like this void once I didn't have it. Like, how can I continue to do things that allow me to feel like I'm being impactful, or like I'm making a difference, and still allow myself to simply be a change agent in one way, shape, or form. And so I found myself, when I was in manufacturing, like, I loved that I was solving problems, but I didn't feel like I was solving problems in a way that made me feel like I was being impactful. And so I realized I wanted to get back more so in new product development, so that way I can actually interact with more customers the same way I interacted with the students on campus, and understand what their needs are and how I could solve them, and how I could put things in place to make them feel like their voices are heard. Because you think about customers across the U.S., they come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. And so for me, it's important to make sure that the people who develop the products look like the people who are going to be utilizing them. And so when I was in my production role, I was a production supervisor. I actually moved over. I switched companies. And I went to an advanced quality engineering role. And that allowed me to do things like usability and understanding, validation, and understanding what the user needs are, and how to make sure that we actually got a product right for customers. But being in Michigan still, it just wasn't for me the most ideal place as a Black female who identifies as gay, because it's not as liberal as I would have liked it to be. And a dream place for me has always been California, specifically between the DC, Maryland, Virginia area and California. Those places to me resonate as cities or states that organically are more inclusive and allow people to thrive when you have multiple identities such as myself. And so when after I was in my advanced quality engineering role, which means I was in new product development, um, I was like, I wasn't getting enough customer interaction. And so I was like, let me go ahead and make that jump into marketing. And so I'm now still in new product development, but I'm now in a marketing role. But all the previous experience I had helped me land that role that I'm currently in. In addition, I was like, if I'm going to make that jump, I want to be somewhere where I actually see myself raising a family, having kids, and actually being able to be authentically myself. Because in order for me to be the best version of me, I need to be able to bring all parts of me to the table, and not just the ones that are convenient or um, are acceptable in a certain space. And here is the first time in my entire career, in my entire life, that I felt like I could be Black, a female, and gay, and still bring my best self to the table. And so it was absolutely a great move, and I couldn't be happier.
Did you mention which company that it was that you joined?
Currently, I work for a company called Stryker.
Okay, and the Stryker's portfolio that also attracted you.
Yes.
So say a little bit about that. What was there?
So Stryker is a medical device company. If you think about the portfolio consists of everything from the moment you get injured. If you think about when you go into an ambulance, those cots you get on, if you see that yellow and black cot, that's a Stryker cot. Or once you get to the hospital, you have the beds, and then once you have to go into surgery, you have all the equipment inside the operating room. That Stryker makes that too. And so I love the fact of feeling like I'm being impactful. Currently, the portfolio I work on is in the operating room. I like to think of it as making the operating room a smart home, because that's kind of what we do. And it's so phenomenal. It makes me feel so impactful to be able to talk to surgeons who use our equipment or something like our fluorescence, or how we're changing the game when it comes to individuals who have breast cancer, and being able to make sure that they walk away feeling like they can still have parts of them that they may not have had our surgery, had our equipment not existed. It just makes me feel very impactful, and talking to our customers and to our surgeons, and just getting out there and really figuring out how to continue to change lives, and just knowing that every single person's life matters, and our equipment has the ability to do that. It just there's literally no better feeling than that. There really isn't.
That's pretty awesome. It sounds like a great place for you to exercise your creativity and your entrepreneurial mindset and make that impact. So did that geographical switch end up being what you imagined in terms of like being able to be yourself at work and in your...
Yes, actually, it really did. It's so funny you asked me that, because I just literally had this conversation with my boss yesterday. Um, like I've never felt like a place was as inclusive um, as it is here. So for me, diversity and inclusion really matters to me. And it's not because I have multiple identities, but sometimes people think of diversity and inclusion as one thing when it's really two things, because you can give somebody a seat at the table, but if you don't give them a voice, it doesn't really matter. And so to feel included from day one, and not to, because a lot of times in an engineering field, because that actually wholeheartedly contributes to my current role as well, being a female engineering, a lot of my judgment gets questioned, or whether or not I can do the job. And then you add on another layer of being Black on top of being a female engineering field, then I have to constantly prove myself, and show that I'm capable of doing um, doing a role. And so here, there's just so much diversity. It's not necessarily having an abundance of Black people. It's about having so many different types of people that when someone different comes to the table, you don't bat an eye or think any different, or question if they belong, because there's just so many different types of people. So having a space that has that much diversity, when I came to the meetings or came to the table, there was no question of whether or not I belonged, or whether or not my contributions were valuable. And so I felt included since day one in a diverse space. And this is also the first time, my wife and I, when we came to find a place to live, first time we don't get asked like, oh, are you guys sisters? Uh, or the classic like, oh, who are your friends? Or, that wasn't a thing. It wasn't an assumption. We literally have not dealt with those kind of things here. And that lets me know and confirms that we literally made the right decision. I've genuinely never been happier a day in my life. I'm doing a job that I feel that I was meant to be doing in a space that I was meant to do it in. And I'm thriving and succeeding in my role. So there's no doubt about whether or not this is the right move for me.
Well, it sounds like a pretty great place and definitely a very supportive and diverse company. Can you say a word or two about the current moment in light of so much national unrest and recognition around disparity that people of color face, and in particular anti-racism? How can you give me a snippet of what that conversation has been like in the workplace?
So, there's been a lot going on in America right now between George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, um, Ahmaud Arbery. It definitely does take a very heavy toll on you, especially as a Black woman. It was very emotionally taxing, and you can't just knowing that any of those people could have. It makes it even more difficult to go to work every single day with a smile on your face, or to feel um, you can't take away all of the heartache that's going on in you when you're joining a meeting, and you still have to put the smile on your face. But what really resonated with me at my company is that I think about my manager was willing to have a conversation, my director was willing to have a conversation, the president of my division was willing to have the conversation. And literally, when I tell you, the director of my department sat down with me for 5 hours just to talk about how it was for me to be a Black female at the company, as well as understanding how I felt and understand my experiences. That was more powerful than anything that anybody could have done, because it let me know that not only do I matter, but my life matters too. And so when I think about my company's response, I appreciate people, even though you don't necessarily have the right words to say, being willing to have the conversation, understanding that although our realities are not the same, you being willing to understand my reality and value the contributions I bring to the table. It makes me feel a lot better working for a company that lets me know that it just confirms, right now, if you think about work, okay, you probably spend more time at work oftentimes than you do at home. So your work becomes a second home. And so to know that, you have a safe space, another home that's a safe space outside of your home, to be transparent and vulnerable and to have those conversations, that allows you to continue to thrive and succeed. And recently we actually just had a panel conversation where our whole division, and actually 886 people showed up to the conversation. And it was open to the whole division, and we literally had a conversation where people shared their realities. They shared times where they've had unconscious bias or racist encounters. They've shared how those conversations have been impacting their family on a personal and professional level. They've also shared how there's been so many questions of how people can be allies, and people want to know what can they do for their fellow peers who are being impacted. It's so easy when you see things happening in America to dissociate yourself from it because you don't know anyone impacted by it. But when you hear your coworkers talking about the times they've had stereotypical behaviors happen, or times of unconscious bias, or being followed around the store, being pulled over just because you're Black in a car, that hits home for them. And to have so many people, an overwhelming amount of people, reach out to say, I did not know you were impacted by these things, or that this could have been you, it lets me know that these conversations are necessary. They needed to be had. And I think that I'm super proud to work for the company I work for, and to know that they're willing to have these conversations and to make sure their employees feel safe, and comfortable being vulnerable, because again, it's work is a home away from home. So to know that I I can have these conversations at home with my wife, but I can come back and have the same conversation with my manager, my director, the VP. It's just powerful, and I'm so thankful and so proud to work for the company I do, because I've seen the responses or the lack thereof of other companies, and I can't say that that's one that I work for.
Well, it sounds like a really special place. I'm really glad that you found a home like that for your career. Um, I I at the risk of going long, I have to go to like a different place. I want to turn the wheels back in time, because while you've actually had a pretty linear path from a standpoint of like, you majored in biomedical engineering, you started work for a biomedical engineering devices company, and then another one, and like that part has been fairly, fairly straightforward. But I know a little bit of your history, where you didn't always know you wanted to be in biomedical engineering, and some early experiences that I'm sure our students can identify with really informed the choices that you made. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned previously, I started out school in 2008. I went to school on a full academic scholarship. I was on a super positive track, so I'm not so all. And I know you also heard me mention that I graduated in 2016, 2017. That is a huge gap in between. Um, and I started out as a pre-med biology major. Going into school, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and that's all I ever wanted to be since the age of 5. I initially pursued the path of being in the medical field and being a doctor. When my sister died I was 5 years old. My sister died at the hands of a doctor. And that was a very traumatic experience for my family, and it changed my life and everyone else in my life's, um, it changed our lives. I mean, I can't even begin to explain what it's like to be 5 years old and to have your 19-year-old sister die just because she was in the process of giving childbirth. Um, and at that moment, that was the moment I literally decided I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be in the medical field because I wanted to stop other families from experiencing um, or going through the pain that my family went through. And so when I went to college, I was an honor student, started out. In my junior year, my grandfather passed, and my grandfather and I were literally like best friends. Like, I'm literally named after him. He's Big Jack, I'm Jackie. And when he died, it that was the hardest thing I've literally ever been through in my life. Having someone who I was so close to, who was like a second father to me, pass away. He died from a heart attack. And again, I'm a biology pre-med major. And so we're talking about anatomy and constantly having to talk about something as simple as a heart. Um, I would break down in class and cry. I legitimately could not handle, um, I couldn't handle my classes just because it was a constant reminder of one of the most important people in my life who I had lost. And mental health is a very cliche topic in the Black community and a lot of communities. And I started going through like a state of depression, and I was like losing crazy weight, and I just like, I didn't want to be around any people. I didn't want to be around friends, and I just stopped going to classes to the point where I just literally stopped going to school. And so at that moment, I literally became like a college dropout because I went from being this honor student in college who was on a great path to now being a student who was on a path of destruction because I didn't know how to pick myself back up at the moment. But me, I will say I'm a very resilient person. It took me a little while, but I got it back together. I did end up having to take about 2 years off from school because during that time, I like, especially once my grades dropped, I had to start taking out loans. But there was a recession a few years before, so my parents couldn't really afford to kind of help me. With my parents just couldn't afford to help me out, and so I had to start working 3, 4 jobs at a time in order to get back into school. So when I actually got back in school, and I felt like it was life giving me a second chance. So I was like, if I'm gonna do it again, I want to do something that won't limit the things I'm capable of doing. Um, and so that's when I pursued biomedical engineering. And when I started engineering, I was actually working three, four jobs while I was in college at first, to the point where after I had been there for about 2 years, people were like, "You go here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Just like I done. I was the oldest person in all of my classes, and I wasn't taking school for granted at all, because I knew that I had just been through so much in those last few years. Because, you think about it, like once you start taking out student loans, they want you to still pay them. You can't put them in forbearance. And my parents made too much per the system to get public student loans. So private student loans, I had to still pay them every month while it was just a very, like, it was just a terrible situation to be in. And I just could not figure out how to make it work. But I'm, it just made me so much more thankful when I got to the point when I could get my bachelor's degree. There was no prouder moment for me than getting a degree, because I had started in 2008 and it took 8 years for me to get there. Um, and that's just, so I don't take anything I've been through for granted. I've been through a lot in life. I've been resilient and bounced back every single time, but I would beat myself up sometimes, because I was like, like, I'm supposed to be here by a certain age, a certain time. But I had to realize that you have to trust your process, because everything you go through, it makes you everything you are. And I would not be where I am right now had I not been through all those things. Like, life is what made me resilient. You know, Everything I've been through is what, like, me going back to school is what allowed me to be at a UIF. And that was one of the most impactful programs I've ever been through in my life. Me going through everything else developed me a work ethic that I never would have had I not gone through this. So there's so many good things that came out of it, and I've grown so much as a person. And I just genuinely couldn't be happier that my story has made me who I am. Like, I own it, and I know that everyone's path is not going to be like mine. But if it is, I want people to own it and be proud of it and understand that there is no right path to get where you're trying to go. It doesn't matter how long. It doesn't matter if you're 40 going back to school. It doesn't matter when you start, as long as you do it. So that's how I feel about everything.
Well, you are the portrait of resilience. I have so much respect for you. And again, I know I'm like way over. I'm sure Tara is going to be like, never again am I let Humera have the microphone. But for those students today who are hurting, they may have lost family members to COVID. They may not see the economic job opportunities. They may be hurting financially, and who see the weight of racism in industry. What would you say to them right now?
Be the change you want to see. Sometimes it's easy to focus on the problem, but focus on the solution. Nothing is permanent. Time is the only thing you don't get back. So focus on all the things you can change, and if you feel like you can't change it, then put yourself in a different situation. Do not focus and harbor on the things you have no control over. And that's literally what I live by. I accept what is, let go of what was, and have faith in what will be. Literally what I live by, and that's what's allowed me to get through every single thing in life. If you've lost a family member, just know everything will get better. There's always you learn from everything you go through. It's either a lesson or a blessing. That's literally everything you go through is a lesson or a blessing. So even though it may seem hard now, it will get better. Um, and that's all I can tell you. It will always get better. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, and there's no such thing as regret, because you learn from everything. So just appreciate the situation, learn from it, and just be resilient. And always don't forget to reach out to people around you. Have a support system. There's people that are always willing to help you. I'm always willing to help. I've been there, I've done that. And so even if it's something as simple as reaching out to a stranger you don't know like me, I'm willing to help. I'm willing to be that listening ear to help you get through it. And you're not alone. You're not alone.
Wise words from Jackie Siler-Dearring. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jackie. You are amazing, and we really appreciate your words of wisdom today.
Thank you too, Humera. Thank you both for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Take care. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.